Malaysia has opposed the Philippine submission to a United Nations body to formally recognize the extent of its undersea continental shelf, saying, "It is projected and overlapped from the baselines of Sabah." In a note verbal to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on June 27, Malaysia's permanent mission to the United Nations said, "Malaysia has never recognized the Philippines' claim to Sabah." Earlier, China had also protested against the Philippines' claims. In a note verbal on June 18 communication, addressed to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, the permanent mission of the People's Republic of China to the UN, said the Chinese government seriously requests the Commission not to consider the submission by the Philippines. Malaysia requested the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf not to examine and qualify the Philippines' partial submission. The government of Malaysia categorically rejects the Philippines' partial submission on the basis that the Republic of the Philippines' continental margin is projected from the baselines of the Malaysian state of Sabah. This clearly disregards Malaysia's indisputable sovereignty over the state of Sabah, the mission said. According to Malaysia, Sabah has always been an integral part of Malaysia and has been recognized by the UN and the international community as part of Malaysia since the formation of the Federation of Malaysia on September 16, 1963. It argued that the Philippines' claim to sovereignty over Sabah is incompatible with its erga omnes obligation to recognize and uphold the legitimate exercise of the right to self-determination by the people of Sabah in 1963. The government of Malaysia wholly rejects the claims by the Republic of the Philippines that the latter has legal ownership and sovereignty over the Malaysian state of Sabah, the mission said. It is clear that the Republic of the Philippines' claim to Sabah has no basis whatsoever under international law. The long territorial disputes of Sabah, between the federal government of Malaysia and the Philippines, presenting itself as the successor state of the Sultanate of Sulu rooted on an agreement signed in 1878 between the Sultan of Sulu and the North Borneo Chartered Company. It maintains the position that the sovereignty of the Sultanate over the territory was not abolished, and that North Borneo was only leased to the North Borneo Chartered Company. However, Malaysia considers this dispute as a non-issue, as it interprets the 1878 agreement as that of cession, and it deems that the residents of Sabah had exercised their right to self-determination when they joined to form the Malaysian Federation in 1963. Throughout the British administration of North Borneo, the British government continued to make the annual cession money payment to the Sultan and his heirs, and these payments were expressly shown in the receipts as cession money. In 1963, during the meeting of Maphilindo, a sub-regional association in Southeast Asia between Malaysia, the Philippines, and Indonesia, the heirs of the Sultanate of Sulu requested payment through the Philippines government to the federal state of Malaysia. The request has been granted by Kuala Lumpur, and the Malaysian government pays an amount considered as a cession, while the Sultanate of Sulu considered the payment as a rental. The annual payment was halted after a militant junta standoff. Former Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said, "The Philippines will not abandon its territorial claim over Sabah, despite aggressive financial offers." He bared the repeated offers in the past involving huge amounts of money for the Philippines to drop its claims over Sabah, formerly known as North Borneo. Meanwhile, visiting Malaysian Foreign Minister, Datu Seri Utama Haji Muhammad bin Haji Hassan, will meet with Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo to discuss the current state of Philippines and Malaysia relations, the DFA said. Manalo and Hassan will also exchange views on regional and international developments during the inaugural first visit of the Malaysian Foreign Minister, since taking the helm of the Malaysian Foreign Ministry in December 2023. Both sides are also working and coordinating to convene the 8th Bilateral Joint Commission meeting, which was last held in Manila more than a decade ago. Manalo invited his counterpart for an official visit. He reiterated the need to sustain the two countries' momentum of high-level exchanges in 2023. The DFA announced on Friday that Hassan will arrive in the Philippines. The Malaysian embassy in Manila said the trip aims to highlight programs to boost cooperation. The Philippines makes this partial submission to build confidence and promote international cooperation in the peaceful and amicable resolution of maritime boundary issues. They clarified that its submission was filed without prejudice to similar entitlements in the region by Vietnam and Malaysia, which also filed claims before the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf that may overlap with the West Palawan region. The Philippines manifests its willingness to discuss with the relevant states the delimitation of the maritime boundaries. The Philippines requests the Commission to examine its submission concerning the West Palawan region without prejudice to the question of delimitation with opposite or adjacent coastal states. Vietnam said it is also willing to talk to the Philippines about its overlapping claims in the South China Sea. Vietnam once again affirms its sovereignty over the Hoang Sa and Trong Sa archipelagos in accordance with international law, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Pham Tu Hang said in a statement posted on a government website. Hang was referring to Vietnam's names for the Paracel and Spratly Islands. The Philippines says it is also willing to hold talks with Vietnam after it called for consultations on a Philippine submission on an extended continental shelf claim in the South China Sea. According to a statement of Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs, Manila is ready to engage Vietnam on possible ways forward that would help achieve a mutually beneficial solution to South China Sea issues in accordance with international law, particularly the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The Philippines also welcomed Vietnam's recognition of the submission, filed on June 14 with the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, or CLCS, to register the Philippines' entitlement to an extended continental shelf in the West Palawan region of the South China Sea. On June 20, responding to Manila's submission, Hanoi did not protest outright but instead said that while coastal states had the right to determine their outer continental shelf boundaries under UNCLOS, when submitting their claims they must respect the legal and legitimate rights and interests of other relevant coastal nations with opposite or adjacent coasts. A spokesperson for Vietnam said, it stayed ready to hold talks with the Philippines to seek a solution that was mutually beneficial for both countries. Meanwhile, China has rejected the Philippine submission, saying it infringed upon China's sovereign rights and jurisdiction and violated international law. Beijing says it holds historic rights over most of the South China Sea, but an arbitral tribunal under UNCLOS in 2016 rejected all of its claims. The Philippine submission, reinforcing the tribunal ruling, has not named China as a party for negotiations on the continental shelf. China and the Philippines have recently been involved in tense confrontations over some reefs that both claim but lie within Philippine waters in the South China Sea. Malaysia also categorically rejects the Philippines' submission on the basis that the Philippines' continental margin is projected from the baselines of the Malaysian state of Sabah. This clearly disregards Malaysia's indisputable sovereignty over the state of Sabah, said a statement issued by the Permanent Mission of Malaysia to the United Nations. Nguyen Hong Thao, professor of international law at the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, noted Manila's willingness to discuss the delimitation of maritime boundaries with the relevant countries. Vietnam and the Philippines have been maintaining solidarity and cooperation for the common good. It is unclear when the consultation is expected to begin. The Philippines asked the UN body last month to formally recognize the extent of its undersea continental seabed in the South China Sea, where it would have the exclusive right to explore and exploit resources. Through the Philippine mission to the UN in New York, the Philippine government submitted information to the UN Commission on the limits of the continental shelf on the extent of its undersea shelf in the South China Sea, off western Palawan province, after more than a decade and a half of scientific research. The Department of Foreign Affairs, DFA, explained that under Article 76 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea or UNCLOS, a coastal state such as the Philippines is entitled to establish the outer limits of its continental shelf. This comprises the seabed and subsoil of the submarine areas, extending beyond 200 nautical miles but not to exceed 350 nautical miles from the baselines, from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured. The National Mapping and Resource Information Agency led the Extended Continental Shelf Technical Working Group that worked on the submission for over 15 years. The DFA underscored the significance of the submission in securing the Philippines' sovereign rights and maritime jurisdictions in the West Philippine Sea, noting that the 2016 award on the South China Sea arbitration confirmed the Philippines' maritime entitlements and rejected those that exceeded geographic and substantive limits under the UNCLOS. Philippine Permanent Representative to the UN Antonio Lagdamio said, the move can reinvigorate efforts of states to demonstrate their readiness to pursue UNCLOS processes in the determination of maritime entitlements and promote a rules-based international order. The Philippines provided data that the West Palawan region is a natural prolongation of the land territory of the Philippines that extends beyond 200 nautical miles from the baselines, thus demonstrating that the Philippines is entitled to a continental shelf beyond 200 miles in the West Palawan region, according to the 30-page executive summary of its June 14 partial submission to the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. According to UNCLOS, A country's continental shelf comprises the seabed and subsoil of the submarine areas that extend beyond its territorial sea throughout the natural prolongation of its land territory to the outer edge of the continental margin, or to a distance of 200 nautical miles from the baselines. But the outer edge of the continental shelf should not exceed 350 nautical miles from the baseline. The CLCS said it would look at the Philippine submission in a session between January and March next year. The extended continental shelf is the stretch of seabed that extends to a maximum of 350 nautical miles from the shore of a coastal state, which has exclusive rights to explore it or exploit its natural resources. Malaysia claims 10 maritime features in the southern region of the Spratly Islands, but may have dropped its claim to an 11th feature, Louisa Reef. Of the 10 features to which it maintains a clear claim, Malaysia controls 7. Vietnam and China also claim all of the features that Malaysia claims, while the Philippines claims only some of the features. Malaysia's claims to certain maritime features in the South China Sea are based on its corresponding claim to a continental shelf, as defined by a 1966 law, a 1979 map, and a 2009 joint submission with Vietnam to the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. In addition, Malaysia has exercised effective control of the features on which it has maintained a presence. On occasion, Malaysian officials have also claimed that the country enjoys rights to certain maritime features because they fall within its exclusive economic zone, although this claim is inconsistently referenced. While several of the features claimed by Malaysia could generate territorial waters of their own, Malaysia has heretofore only claimed a 12 nautical mile territorial sea around 2 features: Swallow Reef, which it controls, and Amboina Cay, which is controlled by Vietnam. Swallow Reef, the only clear island among Malaysia's controlled claims, was occupied in 1983, while the remaining features were gradually occupied through the course of the 1980s. The status of Malaysia's claim to Louisa Reef, which Malaysia and Brunei disputed until 2009, is unclear. In a 2009 joint press statement, the two countries announced that they had reached agreement in an exchange of letters on delimitation of maritime boundaries and modalities for the final demarcation of their land boundary. Brunei subsequently claimed in its preliminary submission to the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf that the exchange of letters delimited its territorial sea, exclusive economic zone, and continental shelf, implying that Brunei also claimed Louisa Reef. Malaysia's claim therefore seems to have lapsed implicitly, although this remains to be confirmed. In addition, 2 submerged systems, the James Shoal and the Luconia Shoals, lie within Malaysia's claimed continental shelf region, but are claimed by China. Compared with other regions of the South China Sea, the coast off the eastern Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak is relatively rich in oil and natural gas, which are a key source of income for the Malaysian government. Of the 11.2 billion barrels of crude oil reserves that the U.S. Energy Information Administration estimates to be located in the South China Sea, 5 billion barrels reside in uncontested Malaysian waters. Determining rights to offshore oil and gas was certainly an important accomplishment of the exchange of letters between Brunei and Malaysia in 2009 that settled their maritime disputes. The Luconia Shoals, which are claimed by China, are host to production facilities and are believed to contain significant quantities of hydrocarbon resources. While some Malaysian production sites lie within China's 9-dash line, disruption of these facilities may run against China's interests as the two countries signed a 25-year liquefied natural gas supply agreement in 2006.